Welcome back to Let's Have It Out. Well, let's hear from one of our viewers. Mishka on WhatsApp asks, SRC President, as someone from DASO at UP who's in governance, do you firmly believe in transformation? And as during Afrikaans Must Fall in 2016, while you were DASO UP chairperson, DASO remained neutral and didn't take their stance. Thank you, Mishka, for your comment. Mr. President, over to you.
Thank you, Mishka, for that question. Look, I'm unapologetic about DASO's stance in Afrikaans Must Fall.
Which is?
For me, I will always be someone who tries to fight for South Africa for all, whether you're black, white, Indian, colored, regardless of your gender, your religious beliefs. I believe that you have a place in this country. To me, Afrikaans Must Fall, the crux of it, was meant to be about creating an inclusive space, for all students at the University of Pretoria. However, I felt, and my organization felt, that it very quickly became an attack on a specific culture. And that's something that we as the Democratic Alliance Student Organization are completely against. You'll also remember, by the way, that as a result of Afrikaans Must Fall, transformation work streams were created. That there was a transformation work stream for curriculum transformation, for language policy, and for res transformation. That work stream, it was only members of the Democratic Alliance Student Organization who sat on it. My feeling is that while we weren't necessarily at the forefront of the movement, we were at the forefront of ensuring that there was that those changes were implemented, and we were the student voices inside those forums, because the structures that took it to the streets were not willing to be part of the actual engagement on the issues.
But I mean, just to take it back a bit, you speak of an inclusive space in the University of Pretoria, or trying to create an inclusive space. But also, just to correct the narrative a bit, I think in one of the statements during Afrikaans Must Fall, student activists were very clear in terms of that the discussion was not about a culture, but about a language used to put one race above the other, particularly in the context of the University of Pretoria as a historically Afrikaans conservative university. Now, I'm sure much has been said about historically conservative Afrikaans and historically conservative English liberal universities like the likes of WITS and UCT. What would you make out to be some of the distinct elements of a historically Afrikaner conservative university, which you have said, for instance, UP and the likes of Stellenbosch were heavily involved in terms of the apartheid regime and drafting policies for those governors. So how is a call for Afrikaans to fall in terms of the language and the status in these particular universities at odds, or seen as something which you and your organization would be naturally opposed to in how it was articulated?
No, as I said, to me it felt, and to my organization, it felt that it was an attack on a specific culture. Without a doubt, we can agree that we need to create inclusive spaces inside our institutions of higher learning. But I'll give you an example. There was physical violence by both the members from Afrikaans Must Fall and by members of AfriForum at the University of Pretoria. One of the most bloody scenes we've ever seen at an institution of higher learning. And I had warned, you and me were in the center, actually, of the two groups. And I had said, Thabo, we can easily, the group can move around another side. It doesn't need to be a situation of either they move or either we move. And I think that that's essentially what, inside my mind, became the core issue, is that we had a situation where it could have been about inclusivity, but it very quickly became an us versus them. And for me, when we're talking about building a nation, we talk about Nelson Mandela's dream of a rainbow nation, something that we haven't achieved yet. It has to be us working together, not opposing each other.
Well, let's keep it at that for now. Let's hear from a caller. We have Lindo Guhle from Pretoria on the line. Hi, Lindo Guhle. What is your question or comment?
Hi. I just wanted to ask specifically a question to Kwena. You keep alluding to questions of inclusivity and transformation, but I wanted to ask exactly what that looks like, especially when you're speaking to the question of race. In our country, we have different racial categories, and specifically we have different political definitions of race. Should inclusivity be based on self-identification or be based on the hierarchical structure based on our historical issues in this country?
An answer.
Thank you very much, Linda, for your answer. Over to you, Mr. President.
Look, I think when addressing the issues that's when you need to look at the hierarchy. It's obviously very clear that inside the current South African political space, economic space, it's still a situation where you find many black South Africans still at the bottom. You know, when you talk about youth unemployment, when you even talk about university graduates that are unemployed, you find that's only about, if I read a stat correctly this morning, 17-point-something% of black graduates that are employed. It's shocking. So without a doubt, we need to obviously pay specific attention to previously disadvantaged groups. But for me, when doing that, we always need to bear in mind that we're trying to build a South Africa for all. And that's when I say it can never be an us versus them. It can never be.
I think this is another comment from Bobo on Twitter. Bobo says that we need young radical revolutionists to be given platform, not these clever blacks who assimilate to whiteness. They don't represent a black child on the ground. They're always sucking up to whites because they are afraid to offend their white friends. Invite woke blacks. That is Bobo. Thank you very much for your comment. What do you make of such a comment?
I don't know if they're referring to you and me or...
I think in this case, my blackness cannot be questioned. But I think just to unpack a bit of perhaps what Bobo might be alluding to is spaces historically reserved for white people, the likes of historically white universities, and not to isolate any other university in this discussion, but I think the matter around fees must fall and roads must fall in particular pierced at the very heart of the university, historically white universities. But I want us to focus particularly on historically conservative universities in terms of how transformation is compromised, particularly for the black child who comes from all walks of life. Some may be privileged in the case in which the Twitter comment is alluding to, but you often find your average black poor middle class student who are by and large in numbers at the University of Pretoria. How should transformation speak to such students in the university, particularly as it pertains to, governance, institutional governance at the university?
Yeah. First, I think I want to address Bobo's statement specifically. I have a huge issue with the narrative of clever blacks, or the statement of clever blacks. To me, it's often a term that's just used to people. Used to describe people of color that have a differing opinion. To me, it's unacceptable, truth be told. I feel that regardless of the color of your skin, you're not confined to a specific thought, a specific ideology just because of the color of your skin. And if your ideology is outside of what's prescribed as you said, revolutionary, that suddenly you are not black, you're a clever black. To me, that's it's preposterous. But to get back to your question, I think especially in the context of the University of Pretoria, I don't think that class plays as big an issue in regards to how you are seen in terms of race. If we look at, for example, the students that were removed because of the color of their skin during my term, it had nothing to do with class. And everything to do specifically with the color of your skin. And so I think we don't need to isolate each other. And it again comes down to that us versus them. We don't need to isolate each other. I think we need to talk about how do we work together. Yes, there are black students at the University of Pretoria that are middle class, that grew up in privilege. But equally, there are white students at the University of Pretoria that grew up in poverty. Often when we talk about this issue, and I saw it a lot, especially during Fees Must Fall, equating blackness to poorness, and it's not always the case. There's an intersectionality between those two, and so for me, it's important that we address the issue holistically.
I think let's just put it there for now. We take more of your questions and comments after the break. Don't go anywhere.